Nowadays, thanks to improvements in living standards and the increasing demand for high-quality preschool education in kindergartens in China, many parents are willing to spend increasingly large amounts of money for their children to be able to enjoy upscale preschool education. Today, on FaceTime, we invite an expert in the kindergarten education field who will introduce to us some new exciting developments in preschool education, namely the IB Primary Years program.
It's a unique program. The International Baccalaureate Primary Years program is a framework for education, and it's to help children be more internationally, globally minded, and actually to try to understand more of commonality between humans, and also be aware of preserving and protecting the planet. So it's very broad in that sense.
And why is it important for kids to receive this kind of education at such a young age? Because I remember when I was in kindergarten, we were just doing finger painting and games.
We still do that. We absolutely still do that. So realize we have kindergarten, we have kids from 2.5 to 6. So when they come in, they're very young. So of course, you play and you nurture and you care for, and at the same time you teach them foundation skills. But the whole focus of it is to broaden them, to be more aware of their community, their world, their families, to be more broad-minded. So the International Baccalaureate is excellent for that kind of approach. It's inquiry-driven. We ask questions. And whatever the child answers, how the child answers, we base that on their prior knowledge, and we sort of go from there.
And in what ways do you try to expand on that knowledge?
The good question. The IB is broken up into 6 units, very broad units. And it goes for 6 years. It goes from age 3 to age 12. So they're the same units. And the units are broad in the fact that they're subjects like, who am I? How do you express yourself? How do you share the planet? How do you organize yourself? So they're very broad. And the children hear this over a number of years, but the content changes. The teacher has control over the content. And when you teach them the content, you're basing that on prior knowledge and you're building on that. So you're building on that knowledge from age 3 to age 12. And so that gives them more of a broader range. You have a starting point and you keep going from there, which is important. The other thing that's important about the IB are languages. And we want kids to be, to know languages. The IB approach is to go out in the world. Go out in the world and make a difference and understand each other. So, for example, BKIK, we're trilingual. We teach English, Mandarin, and Cantonese. Because at that age, 2.5 to 3.5, kids are adaptable. They're sponges. That's such a good word because they can pick up any language. So by the time they're in 6th grade, fabulous. They understand each other. In fact, we have kids in K3 now, 6, that can go between languages, between English, Mandarin, Cantonese, but they know the meaning. So they absolutely understand what the word is in the different languages. That's super.
Because I've heard some people say that teaching young kids at such a young age different languages actually confuses them, but that's not the case, is it?
Well, when they're babies. So when they're babies, what you teach them, and it's a whole approach to teaching and parenting and education, is that you're starting from this starting point. So it confuses a child probably if you give them too much information about a lot of things. But I'm asking you a question. When you answer, I base the next thing that I say, the next move that I make, the next developmental instruction I might give based on that. So I'm not giving you a lot of information. It's not teacher directed. It's based on questions to the students, inquiry, and then from there I go on. So it's much less confusing.
And apart from languages, I just had a chat to some of the students here at the kindergarten, and they told me that they do maths.
Of course we do. Well, the International Baccalaureate, we're transdisciplinary, which means that the approach is all holistic. It's based on the whole child. So all the subjects are interrelated. So you've got math, PE, science, languages. So when you're studying a unit, all the teachers know exactly what the unit is. So their approach and the way they teach it comes from all subjects. So of course they're learning math. Of course they're learning all these subjects, but based on this one focus of that unit.
And how do they deal with learning maths at such a young age? Because when I was in kindergarten, I had never even heard of maths.
Well, math is different. Math is calculating numbers, is playing games, is moving puzzle pieces around. Math isn't what we did with numbers, addition, and subtraction at this point. They're too young. It's getting them to know, again, how things fit together. How do I take away things? How do I add things? That's addition and subtraction. But it can absolutely be done through a game.
You've been in education for a number of years now. Can you tell me some of the things that have left you with the strongest impression over the years? What are some of the things that you've learned?
Probably the most important, and I just say this because I've now worked in 5 continents, and built 3 schools. So you see a lot of kids. You see a lot of parents. You understand a lot about approaches to education. And guaranteed, every single child can succeed. Every single child. You can't diminish the capacity of a child. The world is open to them. And if you motivate them and encourage them and are enthusiastic to the approach of education, they'll want to learn. They'll want to learn. They'll develop a passion. They'll develop a skill. They'll develop more knowledge. Fabulous. Every child does that. You just have to say, okay, go for it now. And that's one of the great things about the IB.
I would imagine that every child would have a unique learning style as well. How do you cater to the different children in the one class?
It's tough because it's differentiating all your instruction. And our teachers, especially at BKIK, we really look for experienced teachers, whether they're native speakers, whether they're English speakers, whether they're Chinese, whatever culture and language that we're in, that's what you look for. So you usually don't start with a beginning teacher. You start with an experienced teacher who's been trained that, and then a teacher's very aware of the learning styles in a class. You get to know your children over a period of time, whether it's a year, 2 years, 3 years. Our teachers stay with us long range. So you can see the developmental stages of the child. So they get to know their kids. And you differentiate, you change your style, or you change your approach, or what you're guiding them with different. It's a tough job. Being a teacher is hard.
Now, I want to talk about you again for a little bit, because just before we started the interview, you mentioned to me that you've actually had some experience in television. So
Long time.
So,
but this is education. But I spent 20 some years. I'm not even going to say how old I am. 20 years or so in that end, very different. But as a communicator, it's a communicator. Education is a way of communicating as well, except it's teacher to child, which is important. In television, as you know, or radio, it's getting a message across. So different areas, but you're still communicating. You're still getting a message across.
the International Baccalaureate Primary Years program is a new trend in preschool education in today's China. We now know what it is and how it works, but is it suitable for Chinese kids? Compared to traditional teaching methods, which is more popular with Chinese parents? Let's hear what our guest has to say. And you mentioned that you have worked in 5 different continents around the world. Is there a difference between the kids here in China and kids overseas, or do you think kids are just kids, no matter where they're from?
I would say there's a difference. The difference is when they're born, they're babies. So they're all babies. And each culture is different. In China, there is pretty much one child per family, and there's a cocoon sort of around the child. There are parents, there are grandparents, there's an IE. So you've got 6 or 7 people. So those people all have a voice in raising that child and nurturing and guiding that child. In the West, like in the US, there's 1 or 2. They're parents. And the parents are the guiding force of that child. So it's more focused. So you've got these different groups of people, and you also have a different approach to parenting. In the US or Western countries, the children are taught at a young age, or encouraged at a young age, to be independent, to think freely, to be imaginative, to be creative, to be risk takers, to go out there and try things. Where in China, perhaps, the becoming an adult or the independence happens much later in life, because you have those people around you, and the tether is still there between the child and the family. We're less so in the West.
And do you feel that early education is crucial in the development of these kids' lives?
Absolutely. It's the most important period, I feel, in the development of a child, in the growth of a child. Between birth and 6 years old, there's so many ways that a child changes. And if during this period, which is why I was talking about languages, or why I was talking about imagination or creativity, if you can spark a child's enthusiasm and motivation to learn at a young age, you've got them for life, because they'll want to keep learning. They'll want to keep gaining knowledge. They'll want to keep trying different things. Very important. If you start it later, then you sort of backtrack. So starting at a young age is like saying, go for it, try it, and be enthusiastic. And with that enthusiasm, they're motivated, I feel, to go much further.
But do you think for some of the Chinese parents, it takes a bit of getting used to some of the styles you use to teach the kids in the kindergarten, because perhaps some of your methods are different to traditional Chinese teaching methods?
I would have to say the IB, you're correct. It's a different method or a strategy of teaching. The Chinese, I have found, are more teacher-directed, where the children are there and there's a lot of information that's given to the children. In the IB, as I said before, there are questions that are asked. And based on those questions, with the prior knowledge of the child, then you go forward. So it's a different teaching style. And you're absolutely right. There are some people, parents or families, that the approach isn't for them. And some parents or families that their child will be in a national system, like the Chinese curriculum, throughout their entire education, then perhaps it's better to go to a traditional kindergarten, because they might think that transition is easier. For an IB school, though, the approach is, we want our kids to go out there. We want our kids to know those languages, to go out into the world, to make a difference, to understand each shared humanity between us. That's very important. So, of course, the approach is different.
And you mentioned the transition. Do some kids find it difficult to transition from being in this wonderful open environment to back into the Chinese public education system?
Well, if you think about it, if you think a 6-year-old, transitions at any point of life are difficult for any age. But for the youngest age, of course, the transition is difficult. If you think back the first day of kindergarten, or first day of first grade, you're probably,
crying.
How,
I was a mess.
Yeah. I hope not crying, but yes, of course, the stress is there. So the transition is difficult no matter what. So if, as a parent, if you want your child to go through the national system and you're in a traditional Chinese kindergarten, yes, that transition might be easier because the child has grown up in that foundation for those first years. For an international education or this approach, The parent might be moving around, so that transition to different schools might be better, they might adjust to it easier. It also depends on the personality of the child. The personality of the child. If you've got an outgoing child that is really, I want to try this or this, then no matter what educational system they'll be in, they'll probably be fine.
I don't know about you, but for me, I've been here 5 years, and the longer I stay, the harder it gets to leave, because your life just is here in Guangzhou. Have you thought about when you might be leaving, or?
For me, I'm from California. I'm from the U.S. So, of course, you will always have roots in your country. Of course. You should. We want that. For me, my son's at university in California. So I have family there, which is, again, important. And at some point, I'll stop. Not yet, but at some point, I'll stop. And I don't know if I'll go home, but I'll always be close. That's always my life. That's always part of me. I don't know yet where I'm going to. Not ready to leave yet. Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you.
Ich bin Schnappi, das kleine Krokodil. Komm aus der My favorite food is pizza. My favorite food is pizza, vegetable, banana. Schnappi, 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 Schnappi.
Do you have a boyfriend? Oh, you do? What's his name? It's a secret. Is he in this kindergarten?
Yeah.
Oh, how long have you been boyfriend and girlfriend for? When do you think you guys will get married?
Maybe there's 20 years.
When you're 20 years old? Oh, okay. So how old are you now?
6.
So you still have to wait 14 years. That's a long time. Do you think you can wait that long?
Yes.
Do you have a girlfriend?
Yes.
Oh, you have a girlfriend?
Yes.
What's her name?
Sophie.
Doki. Is she in your class?
She goes to primary school.
Do you think one day you'll get married?
Yes.
Oh, do you have a girlfriend? You have a girlfriend? What's her name? Catherine. How long have you guys been girlfriend and boyfriend for? 10 months? Wow, that's a long time. Do you love her? Oh. Do you have dreams?
Yes.
What was the best dream you've ever had?
I have a pet llama.
Oh, you had a pet. So if you could have a pet, what kind of pet would you have?
A lizard.
A lizard? That's easy. You don't have to take care of a lizard. You just put it in the cage. Do you have good dreams or bad dreams?
Bad.
Bad dreams. What kind of bad dreams?
Ghost.
About ghosts? Does it make you scared?
Do some good things.
Like what?
A surprise.
And do you know what makes your parents happy?
I eat.
When you eat, your parents are happy.
Yeah.
So sometimes you don't like to eat?